Hello friends, welcome to our lecture series on CSR and continuing our discussion on the relevant literature of CSR measurement, its impact analysis in global perspective. In the previous lecture of mine, I tried to give you, I tried to present before you the entire discourse which was conducted by the different researchers in the field of CSR, and the way this term CSR came into the existence, the way it emerged after a lot of discussions, deliberations and discourse. And we had a discussion on that very topic, that from where this term CSR emerged, and before that what was there into the practice, what researchers have suggested. At one point of time we thought of replacing CSR with CSP, that is corporate social responsiveness. We were talking about their performance, we are talking about their responsiveness. At times we had a discussion on replacing this term social with that of stakeholders, letting this acronym the same, that is CSR, but replacing this social with this stakeholders approach. Now, continuing our discussion, I will be telling you about the Carroll's hierarchy. When we talk about the work of Archie Carroll, it is one of the seminal work in the field of CSR, and their hierarchy of CSR, it has actually given a glimpse of the coming wave of globalization and the complex interdependence well before the other researchers. In the article of 1979, it laid out the first conceptual model of CSP, that is corporate social performance, and with this argument that responsibility suggested motivation and was not measurable, and he opted instead of performance as the operative term, that when we are talking about responsibility, it is basically a motivation, your internal desire to work. You are taking it responsibly, you are responsible for your society, and that is why you are doing. Otherwise, and when I am doing something from my own willingness, then there is no point evaluating it. And that is why the Carroll's perspective was that you can't measure when you are doing it on your own, and that is why he opted performance as the operating term for this specific domain. And he specified 4 domains of CSR, and it is named as economic, legal, ethical and philanthropic. That there are 4 domains of corporate social responsibility, starting from economic to legal, then ethical and philanthropic, and then made a matrix between these 4. And when you look at the study of Carroll, you find a matrix. In the initial lecture of mine, when I was discussing with you the theories of CSR, what are the different theories of CSR, and there we had a discussion on Carroll's pyramid, and the matrix between these 4 came, and with the social issues with which business should be concerned: consumerism, environment, discrimination, safety of the customer in terms of product safety, occupational safety and shareholders. So basically those 4 domains of CSR, they were used to draw a matrix, and then Carroll's pyramid in his 1991 article showed a way of describing the full set of managerial duties in social responsibility terms. So when we look at the managerial duties and responsibilities, we found that in the 1991 research paper of Carroll, we found a matrix, and it was talking about the managerial duties in social responsibility terms. And managers did seem to spend most of their time dealing with routine details of running their businesses to generate profit. Of course, they are basically working on in a routine way to create their business, to generate profit, to achieve their goal of survival, that is, without profit no business can survive. So managers are basically spending a significant portion of their time in dealing with the routine activities of the business. But Carroll emphasized that the economic responsibilities such as long-term return on investments are maximized. Carroll never said that you should not look at the economic responsibilities. It is one of the important responsibility a business is supposed to cater to, a business is supposed to, or you can say a business is entrusted with. So your economic responsibility is to create a long-term return on investment, and that need to be maximized. So your return on investment must be maximized. That was the first responsibility, and it was the emphasis by Carroll. Second emphasis was on legal responsibilities, and they are supposed to be seriously fulfilled. So whatever is the law of land, you are supposed to abide by that in a setup wherever you are operating as a business entity, as a corporate entity. So second responsibility was legal responsibility, and third one was ethical responsibility. Ethical responsibility, when Carroll was defining it, Carroll wanted to convey that he meant that when while securing your new businesses, or while creating your own business venture, whatever new business you are going to secure, whatever promise you are making, you must know that you are intending to fulfill that. So the promises are not made that are not intended to be fulfilled. So if you are not intending to fulfill a specific set of promise, don't make it. That was the ethical responsibility according to Carroll. So Carroll wanted to basically convey here, what Carroll wanted to convey here is that you need to be honest into your business operations, into your behavior. So whatever you are writing, you have to walk your talk. Whatever you are conveying, you need to fulfill that. And if you are not able to fulfill a specific set of promise, don't make it. So he wanted to ensure that promises are not made which are not intended to be fulfilled, and eventually they wanted to say that the managers and employees of your company, they must actively participate in voluntary and charitable activities within their local communities. And it was talking about the philanthropic aspect of a manager or employee of your business enterprise. So when we look at the emphasis of Carroll emphasized that it is not only the social responsibility, but it includes economic responsibility, legal responsibility, ethical responsibility, and philanthropic responsibility, that you have to take care of the voluntary and charitable activities. So if you look at in the emphasis list of Carroll, if you look at the philanthropic aspect, it is one of the important points of CSR. It is not the only point, it is one of the important point. You are operating in a business setup, you have to your responsibility is not only economic but also legal, ethical, and managerial and philanthropic. So even earning profit is your responsibility for survival. You can't survive for long if your business is not generating profit. So for survival, profit is something which is very much required, and according to Carroll, it is the first and the foremost responsibility with which a business is entrusted by the stakeholders. And if we look at the empirical findings after the Carroll's work, there are different other researchers which try to practically apply, replicate the suggestions, the ideas given by the Carroll. And if we look at the study by Oberle, they calculated the overall degree of importance placed on items representing each of the four categories. So the research by Oberle calculated the overall degree of importance, that what is the comparative strength of these four categories. And he reported that the factor analysis of the results from 241 CEOs, it showed that the relative weights of the four categories similar to Carroll's visual weighting in the pyramid. So when Oberle replicated it, the entire idea of Carroll with the help of primary data of 241 CEOs, the results from 241 CEOs, he found the same reflection. The relative weight of the four categories was found to be identical to what Carroll gave as a pyramid. So Carroll's visual weightings in the pyramid was further validated by this study by Oberle. However, if we look at the study by Carroll, it also found a strong inverse relationship between the economic and ethical dimensions, which suggested a natural conflict of strategic choices. Of course, there is a strong inverse relationship between the economic and ethical dimensions, that if you are trying to be economically viable, or if you are only willing to increase your profit, then of course ethical dimensions can actually affect inversely your profitability. And it suggested that it is basically a natural conflict of strategic choices which a company is supposed to make. after Carroll and the replication of his study by Opperle, Wood and Wartic along with Cochrane updated Carroll's model, and they folded in some additional concepts which made this CSP model, they thought, more robust and logical. If you look at their studies, according to them, their idea of folding in some additional concepts made CSP model more robust and logical. And they basically presented three challenges to CSR. If we look at the studies conducted by Wood and Wartic, we find that there are three important challenges to CSR. One is the economic responsibility, second is public responsibility, and third one is social responsiveness. So they presented three important challenges to CSR. So when we talk about corporate social responsibilities from the existing literature on this subject, we find that in the study of Wood and Wartic, there are three important challenges: economic responsibility, public responsibility, and social responsiveness. Now their model incorporated further three segments also: principles, processes, and policies. And these principles, processes, and policies, they represented philosophical, institutional, and organizational orientations respectively. So their model basically incorporated three segments and three challenges along with that three segments, and these three segments were principles, processes, and policies, which you can call as 3 Ps, and they are representing philosophical, not only the philosophy but also from the institutional perspective, the orientation of your corporate entity, it was also considered. And the principle of CSR were taken from Carroll: economic, legal, ethical, and discretionary. From there they took, and these resulted, according to Wartic and Cochrane, from businesses social contract with society and the fact that business acted as moral agents within society. They wanted to say that the businesses acted as a moral agents within society, and you are basically working as a change agent where you are acting or working ethically and morally you are correct. So the processes of responsiveness were also following Carroll: reactive, defensive, accommodative, and proactive. And they were the processes that allowed businesses and also their managers to respond to the changing societal conditions and demands. So they wanted to convey here is that policies finally they were proposed to manage social issues, including policies of issue identification, that you have to identify the issue, what I initially conveyed when I was telling you, referring to the big issue. So what policies of issue identification that need to be discussed here, and then the issue need to be analyzed, and after that what is your response to that issue that need to be developed, and these such policies may help companies to avoid surprises and of course determine which social policies were effective. So when we look at the study, this specific study, we find that the objective of your company should be, your corporate entity should be, to identify the issue which that specific country in which you are operating, specific zone in which you are operating is witnessing, and then analyze that issue and develop your response. And this may help your company to avoid surprises, and of course it will determine which policy is going to be effective for you. Now further, when we review the Carroll's model, Wood was reviewing the Carroll's model and subsequent extensions. They saw that while doing so, Wood found that while Carroll might be accurately describing how managers saw their social responsibilities, so they were not taking into account the sociological complexity of their roles and in your society in which you are operating and the effects their actions had on others. In short or conclusively, we can say that they were responding as though they managed rationally in a closed system. So they were thinking that we are working in a closed system, and accordingly they were responding. So Wood, this is the reason why Wood attempted to impose some order on 3 decades worth of scholarly literature that reflected wide variance in how CSP and social responsibility were viewed. And it contained surprisingly little critical analysis or cross discussion. So according to Wood wanted to convey here that surprisingly there was a little critical analysis or cross discussion, and which was supposed to be there, and here comes the system framework. So using a basic systems framework, Wood organized the literature into structural principles of responsibility as input. So Wood tried to create a system framework, and if you can say it is a kind of aggregation of whatever existing literature says. So they organize the literature into structural, not in terms of philosophical perspective, but in terms of principles. So they wanted to take responsibility as input, that consider your responsibility as your input, processes of social responsiveness as throughputs, that during that process of your journey in for the welfare of stakeholders, the processes of social responsiveness were considered as throughputs, and finally outputs and outcomes. So there were three steps they have organized into: structural principles of responsibility as input, processes of social responsiveness as throughputs, and finally your output and outcomes which you are generating. So conceptual framework for measurement is basically the application of Wood's model, and on the basis of that glossary definition of CSR and based on Carroll and Wood definition which we have discussed just before, Hopkins devised a framework to measure CSR. Michael Hopkins basically came up with an idea of a framework to measure to do the measurement of CSR, and Hopkins desired to use a sound theoretical basis which was raised by both Archie B. Carroll and Donna Wood in their work over period of 1970s to 90s. So Hopkins, when we look at the measurement framework given by Michael Hopkins, and when you look the way he is trying to evaluate or measure the CSR activities, he desired to use a sound theoretical background. He wanted that the background, the theoretical background in which we are doing the measurement, it must be sound, and that's why the points raised by both Archie B. Carroll and Donna Wood was basically used. And today if we look at the indicators, they still seem to be chosen on the whim of the moment. So at times whatever the prevalent problem is, whichever problem is prevalent, we are taking that, and accordingly we are evaluating that specific performance. But Hopkins framework to measure CSR is basically focusing or emphasizing that at least some data is now existing to measure progress on social aspects of corporate behavior, and that is a good sign that now we have data available for this kind of measurement, so that we can have a quantified judgment on this. In fact, it is even possible to use some of the available data which companies are nowadays making available to hazard a guess as to whether CSR is getting better or worse. So unless we have data, unless we have statistics, we can't have the quantified answer to the questions that whether the CSR is doing better or not. So yet the power of the average seems to hide a variety of sins, as seen in the short review and comparison of how CSR is measured in 7 well-known measurement frameworks. So when you look at the data, when you look at the CSR performance in quantified terms, then only you are able to give a judgment, and that is why the measurement is very important. And without a strong theoretical underpinning, we cannot have a robust model or framework for evaluating or measuring the CSR activities of a company. So the attraction of CSR as defined in the definition segment when we were talking about CSR is that of a systems approach following Wood and according to Clark et al. When we refer to their studies, who are the stakeholders of a company, has also sparked intense debate, but at minimum they include those within the company. They are basically including at minimum within the company, like say for instance board of directors, shareholders, investors, managers, employees. And if you look at outside company, they have the list of suppliers, customers, natural environment, government and local community. And this is what I was referring to when I was telling you about the internal and external environment. So there is a 3P model for measurement of CSR given by Michael Hopkins, and the Wood framework as modified by Hopkins in 2005, it measures CSP, corporate social performance, and hence the impact of CSR by following a business organization's configuration into 3 levels. So in his 3P model, Michael Hopkins is giving it a name called 3P model, and Hopkins says that there are 3 levels of it. One is principles of social responsibility, second is processes of social responsiveness, and third one is products, or what you call as outcomes of social responsibility. So Michael Hopkins, while doing this measurement of CSR, Michael Hopkins basically gives 3 level configuration to the response of a corporate entity. He says that what are the principles of social responsibility, what are the processes, principles are there, and after that second level is what are the processes of social responsiveness, the way you respond, and third one is products, that is the outcome of your social responsibility. Hopkins was basically calling this, if you read his book From the Margins to the Mainstream, you will find that the title of the book is CSR and Sustainability from the Margins to the Mainstream, and it in that very book Hopkins called this the 3P model for the measurement of CSR. He says that this is basically based on the framework given by Wood, and Hopkins has modified it for calling it as 3P model for measurement of CSR. And when Michael Hopkins is giving this entire idea of CSR's conceptual frameworks, there are at least 7 main measurement systems, and you find it very comprehensive, the 3P model, which I'll be discussing in due course of our lectures on this very topic. The source of information is basically coming from where? From various websites that each index generator maintains. So whatever information which we are gathering, it is coming from where? What is the source of information? From various websites which each index generator maintains. The format of discussion chosen for each system is a concept used, definition, conceptual framework, indicators defined, and measures given. So while assimilating all the ideas or inputs given by different researchers in this field, Michael Hopkins chose a format, and that format of discussion was chosen for each system, and it was given in a tabular format, which I will be discussing with you or presenting before you. And it starts with the concept used, definition, conceptual framework, indicators, definitions, and of course the measures given. Now the question comes, what is the term concept used stands for? It is basically the definition of the main measure which is addressed by the measurement system. So what you are going to address, your system is going to address what is the problem. Second one is conceptual framework, and it is the development of a set of issues and indicators based on definition or the concept deconstructed. So whatever concept you are using, accordingly you are creating a conceptual framework, and then you define indicators, whether precise indicators are defined to measure the indicator, and of course finally do you have any data, actual measures given. So with this, the most useful information in list of indicators is when you are finding an issue such as profit defined and measure given such as profit as percentage of sales or given year for all company operations. So before we talk about that comprehensive 3P model given by Michael Hopkins, I'll be telling about GRI, which is the most significant reporting initiative, which is known as Global Reporting Initiative. So in the next lecture of mine, I'll first be telling you about GRI, and then we'll discuss about the Hopkins 3P model on measuring the CSR effectiveness of a corporate entity. I hope you must have enjoyed today's lecture of mine. Thank you so much.